Okay. Okay. And we still are waiting for people. How long have you you just get through with that other session?
Yes.
No, y'all just got through with the other session.
Yes.
So
Yes.
others may have had to they'll be doing it. Well, let's just wait just a second just to see.
I know when I got off, there were quite a bit that were still on, still asking questions.
Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and get started, and they can just join us because we have a lot to cover tonight, and I don't want to hold anybody up. Thank you for sharing that, Tamika. Let's go ahead and get started. And what I have before you, and you will find this under week 2 in your shell. And Dr. Revis, I forgot to tell you, you may want to put that under week 2 in your shell as well. But this is just showing the agenda for today, and this is what we're hoping. We're hoping and praying that we're going to be able to cover everything that we've got on here. What I will do in just a second, we'll look at week 2, which is this week, and then I want you to always know that you need to look at what is due this week, what are you doing this week, and you should already be prepared to have an idea of what the next week looks like, and I'll explain that in just a second. But please make sure that you realize that from this point on, that you're looking at, this is what I'm doing this week, but this is what is coming due next week. You should always have that in the back of your mind. I'm going to do a quick review of task 1. I'm not going to beat that horse to death, but I'm going to do a quick review of that. Then Dr. Revis is going to do a brief presentation, a PowerPoint presentation on professional learning communities. We're going to go into an introduction of task 2 because many of you will be at that place that you can actually get started with that this week. I'm going to talk about prompt 1. Dr. Revis will comment as needed, and then Dr. Revis is going to talk about prompt 2, and I will comment as needed. We're going to go into peer reviewing because that is something that you will begin doing next week, and we're also going to, or Dr. Revis is going to introduce it today, and then on Thursday, I think that it's going to go into more detail with everybody on Thursday night, Dr. Revis. So, and then even though you've just had an APA session, Dr. Revis is going to talk about some things that are specific to what you're doing. What you heard was the broad perspective, and Dr. Revis is going to narrow it down, and then we're have a time for question and answers and to bring closure to it. Dr. Revis, do you have anything you want to say before I go to the next step?
No, let's get rolling.
Okay, and I have to be careful because I'm getting old, so I have to take my time with this stuff so I don't mess up. This is and I'm going to minimize this right now. Let me close this out for just a second so that we can see everything. What I was talking about, this is week 2, and if you know, these are topics of discussion, and at some point, it may not happen tonight, it'll happen Thursday night, or topics that you will look at, and this could come actually through your resources in your reading. Now, Joel, this is where I was talking about. These are the required readings. One of the textbooks, and I'll call it the Ubben textbook, you are required to read chapter 3. Now, when you get to chapter 3, you will notice that chapter 3 aligns itself with a lot of the work that you're doing. And there's also a link here that where there is some reading as well. So you will click on this link and you're required to do this reading as well. Now, will Dr. Revis and I come back and discuss this with you? Probably not, because we don't have time. However, when you are doing your research work throughout your evidence work, you have an opportunity to cite information that you have found in these readings that will be relevant to the work that you're doing. So we will look to see that something in Ubben that you have read, that it is being used in some of the research work that you're doing as well. And you'll see where that all comes together once you've done the reading, and as well in these other resources that we've given you. So that is where the textbooks come into play. And again, they are required by the university. They want you to get them from their bookstore, but if you can get them in other places and get them less expensive, then I would say do what is best for you. These are your assignments. Remember, we said that whatever is in red, that applies to your work with the AAPSL. And I want you to notice this week, the AAPSL Task 1 draft only is due in Blackboard's discussion board, and I'm going to show you in a moment what you do with that. And then you should have already set up your basic Zoom account, your free Zoom account. So this week, the only thing that will be due Sunday night by 9 o'clock, and you don't have to wait until then, but it's due by then, is AAPSL Task 1 draft in Blackboard discussion board only. Now, let me, while I've got this, let me go on to show you week 2 so that I can tell you from this point on how you need to be looking at things. You will look under week 3, under assignments. I want you to notice everything in red. That means that everything that you see here is going to be applicable to the work you're doing with the AAPSL. Now remember, I said this week, week 2, the only thing due is going to be AAPSL Task 1, and it's going to go to discussion board for review and comments only. Next week, what you just reviewed this week and what you put in discussion board will actually be submitted for instructor evaluation next week. So task 1 will be submitted week 3. We'll review it this week, and you will get it officially graded next week. But I want you to notice, while you are turning in task 1 for a final grade, look what you're doing with task 2. So beginning next week, when you are submitting a task for a final grade, you are also submitting the next task for review and discussion board at the same time. Also beginning next week, you will begin your peer reviews, and that's where your Zoom groups come into play. You will need to decide from your group which 2 people you're going to do peer reviews on, and Dr. Revis is going to talk about that this evening. And you will decide as a group, everybody doesn't want to review the same person, so you need to get together as a group and decide who's going to do what so that everybody is getting their work reviewed. And then this last thing, establish Zoom schedules and set policies with your assigned Zoom groups. Again, this goes back to going ahead and establishing with your Zoom team, those things that you need to go ahead and introduce yourself to your group. You need to become familiar with each other. This, you don't have to turn anything into us with this. This is something that you as a group will do on your own. So somebody in that Zoom group needs to take the lead when it comes to this, and you don't have to wait until next week. You could go ahead and do it this week. But I'm just telling you, you're doing week 2 this week, but you need to look at week 3 and already have an understanding of what week 3 is going to look like. Let me come back up here. Okay, give her back. I wanted to point out one more thing. With the work that you've got to turn in, let's just say for your AAPSL task for review. Okay, there's two places you can turn it in. Here's the AAPSL task for review section. You should have already done your contact information, and this is showing us that. But this is where you submit the AAPSL task 1 for peer and instructor review. This is the same thing as your discussion board. So when you get ready to turn your task 1 in for Dr. Revis and me to look at, and your peers and the world can look at it as well, you would just simply click on that section and you will create a thread. You know what to do from there. And you will have a Word document. You will attach your Word document. That will be your task 1, and you will submit it to the discussion board for Dr. Revis and me to look at and to make comments on, and for your team or whoever's doing your peer reviews to look at it as well. Again, this is what you do for us by Sunday of this week. Another place is the discussion board. Let me find where that is. Discussion board. That's the same thing. It'll take you to the very same links that I just showed you. It's just two places of doing the very same thing. So does everybody understand what is due this week? Your AAPSL task 1 to discussion board for our review and comments only. And this is where you create your thread and you submit your work from there. Dr. Revis, any comments on that? Okay, you're muted.
I would just like to suggest that you get in the practice of, as soon as you submit your task 1 in draft form, and when we say draft form, guys, we don't mean incomplete. We just mean that it's not the polished, finished product. You need to have it complete when you submit it for instructor and peer review. But once you do that, then you very quickly need to go ahead and start pulling 2 other classmates in your peer review team. You need to go ahead and start pulling those to do a peer review. That should be the very first thing you do on Sunday evening after you post your task 1. Get those out of the way so the rest of the week you can spend on prepping and preparing for task 2. So you'll get in a good cycle of how to do this work, but always immediately peer review, and then you can start on next week's work.
I want to remind you that, and Dr. Lamb brought this to our attention on Monday in our faculty meeting, and this is new for this year. I want you to notice there is a section called attendance. You're not required to actually come online with us. You're required to review the video once it's posted, but attendance is being taken. And how will attendance be taken? Work that you are to submit on Sunday night, Dr. Revis and I will begin assessing it Sunday night, and we will be looking at it Monday morning. If the work has not been submitted by Monday morning, and I would say, Dr. Revis, by 9 o'clock that morning, that if it's not submitted, then we are required to go in here under attendance and to show that you were absent for the week because your work was not submitted. So please make sure that you do get your work to us on a regular basis. And if if you need to communicate with us personally about something, then you need to. But however, there's only so much Dr. Revis and I can do because we are regulated by the university to be upfront about attendance. If there's an emergency and it needs to be a legitimate emergency, Something happened beyond your control, communicate with us, and we can work with you one-on-one with things, but it should not be an ongoing thing. Dr. Revis, any comments on that before we move on?
No, guys, we're not just ignoring your chat box, but we're going to get to some of that information. So if you just hang on, and if we don't get to it by the end of class, then we'll give you an opportunity to ask that question. But I think we will get to most of those questions during the presentation tonight.
Okay. Okay.
Do you want us,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, do you want us to just put questions in the chat box and leave them there for you?
No, if everybody will hold off, actually, Joel, we'll do like we did last time. We'll come on at the end, and I'll stop sharing, and everybody come on board, and we can just cut. If it's not answered, everybody can come on board, and we can just everybody will have an opportunity to ask that last question if there's something that we need to. And those that it doesn't apply to, they can just click on off and go out if they don't want to stay with us. Is that okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, let's do that. I think we can get more accomplished if we do that. One other thing that I want to quickly go over is I'm going to go to the AAPSL Helpful Hints document and just quickly review again what is due this week with task 1. Remember, we asked you to work on your school profile, and that you're going to have your cover sheet. And remember, I said on your cover sheet, and that's on your template. The only thing that you do differently is to put your name there. Joel's going to put Joel Rose there, and that's all you have to do to that page, and then you go to the next page. After that, we ask you to go ahead and create your school profile. That's where you're telling the story about your school and the surrounding community. And an example of that is also in the AAPSL example that is in Blackboard for you as well. You can see an example of what one of those would look like. Then you go into task 1. Remember, we said all the directions in black or whatever, they stay there. You don't change any of that. If it's in yellow, remember we said that that's where you've got to replace it with some type of narrative. And if there's something in red, that's directions and clues for you to make sure that you have that information included in what you do. So with prompt 1, what do you do? Following the template and following the example that we've given you, your first heading is, you're simply going to write PLC research, and I can promise you, this is written according to the new APA 7th edition, PLC research. In that section, number 1, what are you doing? As we said last week, with a minimum of 3 sources, you're going to talk to us about what is a PLC? What does a PLC look like? You know, a little bit of the history behind it. In this, you're going to describe your PLC design in the narrative work, and you must, one of your references must be at a minimum do 4. And if you go back to your AAPSL template and materials in Blackboard, we gave you some good resources there. I would tell you, I don't care if everybody uses the same reference there for do 4. As Dr. Lamb pointed out last Thursday, is one of the best. And you know, he is the founder of PLCs or the father of PLCs. So I would say, you know, you don't have to, but I would say if the resources are there, take advantage of them. There's some other information in there that's going to be very, very important as you complete task 1 as well. And then again, number 2, very quickly, your heading is PLC selection. You're going to put PLC selection as your heading, and then underneath that, you're going to talk about the people that's going to be serving on your team. Again, who are they? Why did you pick them? What do they bring to the table? What are their expertises? What are their strengths? Talk about their educational credentials. Anything that you can tell us about those people, actually give them a name. It doesn't matter. And then The PLC meeting, this is an actual meeting that you're going to conduct with these people that you've selected. It doesn't have to be a long meeting, but what does this meeting consist of? You're simply going to meet with them and you're going to talk to them, thank them for being a part of your PLC, and you're going to talk to them about what they're going to be helping you to do. What is the vision and the purpose of them working with you this semester? And in that, you're going to say, during our meeting, we're going to establish meeting norms. Now, if you go back to those resources again in Blackboard, there is, we've put a whole article in there on what PLC meeting norms should look like. Take advantage of that. When are you planning to meet? How are you planning to meet? And I know that that it's going to be different based on what your schools look like right now. It could be virtual sometimes. It could be face-to-face sometimes. You just talk about what that's going to look like. I got this question this week, Dr. Revis, about the references. Do I have to do a reference every time I do a task? If it's applicable, yes. Remember, in number 1 up there, you're doing research, right? A minimum of three resources. So guess what? You're going to have at least 3 references under this section, at least 3, and you could have more. Remember, that's APA style. What about an appendices? Yes, every time you're going to do an appendices as applicable, and in this appendices, at a minimum, you're going to have where you requested an email to your principal to do your PLC, and their affirmative response. You're going to have an agenda of your meeting and minutes of that meeting at a minimum. Those are going to be 3 artifacts that you're going to put under appendices in this section. And I would say also, if you're doing a face-to-face, have someone to take a picture of you presenting. It shows your leadership. But that is what task 1 should look like this week. Following the template and following the guides that we have provided for you in Blackboard. With that in mind, I will come back to this section in a little bit, but with that in mind, I want to go to
okay, this is a PowerPoint professional learning communities that we did last semester or in spring semester. So I just thought I would go ahead and use it again very quickly. I personally believe the terminology PLCs gets overused quite a bit in education. And in fact, it is used from everything from a departmental meeting or any kind of gathering. And so what we want to do is we want to ground our PLC in what the research says, and the founding father being DeFore. So the very essence of a PLC learning community is a focus on and a commitment to the learning of each student. And that is a definition from DeFore, Aker, and DeFore. And on the next slide, the 3 big ideas that come from DeFore's PLC is a focus on learning, on student learning for all students. And it's not just focusing on the students who are almost to proficiency or the gifted students, it's for all students. And secondly, it's through a collaboration, a culture of collaboration. And we want to focus on results, keeping that discussion on results.
And Dr. Revis, I will tell you, this is most students, this is included in the literature review that they do on DeFore. What you see right here, 3 big ideas, you're going to find that in most any of the research that you do.
So there are 3 big questions when we sit down in a true professional learning community, and that is, what do we want students to learn? How do we know when they have learned it? And how will we respond if students experience difficulty in their learning? And so I think these are 3 powerful questions. They seem simplistic on the on staff, but I think if you really think about it, when we bring teachers around and having a discussion about what we want students to learn, we're talking about our standards and objectives. And you would think it would be standardized, but as you well know, some of those objectives and curriculum standards are written pretty broadly. But it's about what do we want students to learn, and how are we going to know if they've learned it? What are we going to agree upon as our evidence or our criteria to say that we believe students have learned or mastered this objective? That brings in a lot of good discussion with educators. And then again, how will we respond when students experience difficulty in their learning? And that's when you come in with the extra support. And what kind of extra supports and what kind of structure are we going to utilize in order to deliver that extra support? So I want to just say to you that unless you're in a unique school, and some of you may be in schools where professional learning communities are the norm and they have been established for a while, and we have that sense of collaboration, but that's not always the case. So if you're bringing together a new group of professionals, be sure you understand that that collaboration just doesn't come naturally. Just because we have a PLC in our school around 7th grade math doesn't mean if I pull together a new group of teachers that they're going to know how to collaborate together. You have to build that atmosphere of trust. And as a facilitator, that's what you do when you're facilitating that PLC. And I think one of the ways that we do that is by establishing those norms. How do we agree to operate as a PLC? That's what a norm is. And having that discussion in that first meeting about, guys, how are we going to make decisions and come to a consensus when we're doing our work? How will we agree to disagree professionally? How will we agree to communicate both within our meeting and when we leave? When will we meet, and what information is confidential in this meeting? What do we hold sacred within this room, and what information can be shared outside of the group? All of those are questions and issues and agreed upon norms that you need to have and take care of in that first meeting this week. One good guidebook that's in your materials is the PLC guidebook. I think I can't remember where it comes from, a school district actually, and there are some really good templates to help guide you and lead you in establishing those norms. Again, remember we talked about it being results oriented. We have to focus on tangible results. It's not good enough just to say we want to improve student achievement in 3rd grade reading. We need to set a target, a tangible target. We need not only to set long-term goals, but we also need to set some short-term goals. And you're going to see this play out in one of your AAPSL tasks that you're going to do later on. And we want to examine our results and continuously reflect on student performance and our work and what we can do differently or better. So it's a continuous cycle. When we look at improvement in schools, we are looking at a continuous cycle. What you're doing in your AAPSL mirrors this cycle quite nicely, I think. You're starting at the top with delving into your current state of student learning, and that's what you're going to do in task 2. And then in task 3, you're going to investigate some research-based strategies based on that learning need that you have identified. And then you will design a plan to do implementation. Now, you may not see that cycle all the way through in this particular course, but what happens is we implement those strategies and we do some monitoring. Don't forget that monitoring's in there with that as well. And then we start examining that impact. And that's your cycle for continuous improvement. All teams are potentially dysfunctional, and again, just make sure that when you bring your team together, even though they may have been working in a PLC and working very well in other PLCs, when you bring together a new PLC, be sure you establish those norms. lack of team goals, be sure you tell them right up front where we're going. We're going to look at this particular piece of student learning. And again, you've collaborated with your administrator on that before you get into this meeting. Teams can be dysfunctional if there's a lack of trust. If you don't go through and talk about how we make decisions and how we professionally disagree and how we're going to communicate both within our meeting. I hope you're not going to scream and get upset like the folks here in this picture, but not only how we're going to communicate once we when we're in the meeting, but how are we going to communicate when we leave this meeting? Is it okay that we send individual emails to each other, or do we agree that we're going to group copy everybody on this email? Those kinds of little things can enhance and build that trust. And if we don't focus on student learning outcomes, then I don't think you'll reach your goals.
Right, and that's why it's so important to make sure you find a team that you can work well with.
And the last thing before I give you some bibliography resources, which I'm not sure if all of these resources are posted, I don't think they are, but I just want to emphasize the L in PLC, professional learning. I have seen schools grow leaps and bounds with student learning through engaging very seriously in true professional learning communities. It does make a difference. And then the last, some more resources. These were shared by Dr. Stone probably about a year ago. Again, I don't know which of these are up in our web, in our Blackboard shell, but you have them here in this PowerPoint because it is posted. You have a lot of good resources in order to get your PLC, not only to do the PLC research, but to get your PLC up and going in a very positive direction. Thank you.
Okay, let me come back to that. Now I want to, give me 1 second. Let me find my document. Here it is. I want to come back to the AAPSL helpful hints. And what I want to do is, this is not to overwhelm you, but you will find that from this point on, one of the things that we've got to do is, as I've pointed out already, we have to always, you will always know a week ahead of time things that you need to be working on as well. And there will be some of you that will want to work ahead or be able to work ahead. So we're going to go ahead and talk to you about task 2 of the AAPSL. And again, make sure that you are reading all of the descriptions and the instructions that are laid out in the prompts and the directions for this. This is just an easier document to work from, but the others are the official documents. So please make sure that you read all of that. Again, under task 2, the heading is, and you see it right here, data collection strategies. What am I going to be doing? With this, you will work with your selected PLC that you formed in task 1 to determine the strategies that's going to be used to collect all the data to determine the most pressing need for improving student achievement. Your ultimate goal is, we're tasked with coming up with an action plan, and we've got to improve student achievement at our school. Okay, well, where am I going to begin? This is what you and the team are going to look at. You're going to collect everything that you can possibly put your hands on. Well, what are those things? Well, it's going to be your ABC report card. It's going to be benchmark testing. It's going to be, and Dr. Revis just names in any other thing. Anything that you use to measure student performance at your school.
And don't forget EBOS.
Academic performance.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that you use, should be laid on the table and just laid out. It's like a puzzle. All of this stuff is what we use at our school to determine academic performance or academic growth or achievement with our students. This is what you're tasked to do in number 1 of task 2. You and your team are going to look at all of that, and then what are you going to do? Your narrative work for this selection is just simply going to discuss the strategies. You're going to say, the PLC team and I. It's not going to be I, because if it's just I, you're not leading. But the PLC team and I, and then you finish the rest of the story from that. Okay, number 2, what do? Number 2, you've laid all this stuff out on the table because it's just everything that you can get your hands on that tools that have measured student achievement at your school. Your heading is going to be criteria and process for identifying the most pressing need. Now, once the team and you have determined the strategies for collecting the data, you will decide what criteria and what process is going to be used for identifying the most pressing need. In other words, you're starting with the big picture up here. And then what you're doing now, you're going to narrow the focus. You're going to say, okay, you're going to talk about it up there. But then in number 2, you're going to start weeding out what you can and cannot use, or your discoveries. This is the discovery time. When you start looking at the data, this is when you're going to begin discovering specific things about your school. And again, I use Joel and Tamika because they're right in front of me. Joel's going to look at it, and he's going to see things. He's going to see things one way. But then Tamika's in that same group, and guess what? She's going to see some things. She's going to say, but look at here. Joel would not have seen that, but Tamika picks up on it. That's the whole purpose of working with your team. What one person may not see, the other person will see. And so everybody's going to put out everything on the table. And from that, you will begin in number 2, you're going to begin narrowing the focus, because you're going to begin discovering things. And your discussion here is going to be, again, you're going to decide what criteria and what process are you going to use to identify the most pressing need. You're looking for one thing, the most pressing. What is the one thing that we need to work on the most? Now, you probably or may think you already know that, but guess what? We've had a lot of groups to come back and say, wow, we thought one thing, but when we started digging and disaggregating this and looking at that, wow, it was a whole new story. And then you're going to go to number 3. Now, again, you're going to write about it. Your narrative work is you will write about it, what you and the team discover and what you do there. Number 3, your heading is collaborative data analysis. I want you to look at that word, collaborative. Again, that doesn't mean that you do it by yourself. That means you work with your team. Data, that's everything that you've gathered up there. Analysis is you're going to tear it apart. Everything that you have gathered in number 1, that you've talked about in number 2, number 3, guess what? You're going to tear it apart. You're going to look at it from one into the other. And again, it goes back to what I said earlier. This is where a lot of discoveries are going to come to. You should know everything there is to know about the data that you've collected. And again, what are you going to do? You're going to talk about it there, because at the conclusion, number 4, your heading is most pressing need. Once step 3 has been completed and you've disaggregated that and you've analyzed it and you've torn it apart every way that you possibly can, you and the team are going to determine, based on what we see here, based on what we have, this appears to be the most pressing need for my school or for our school. And you're going to write that there. You're going to say, this is the most pressing need. And you're going to tell why it's the most pressing need. And you're going to tell why it's the most pressing need. Okay, Dr. Revis, if you will pick up with task 2.
Okay, I just want to say in task 1, that's about delving into your data and doing that data dive. And I've had candidates in the past who may have been like an arts teacher or a physical education teacher who hasn't lived in a tested subject, and they feel very uncertain and insecure in delving into the data. But this is your chance to learn. And you don't have to have all the answers, but I would make sure there were people in my PLC who were very data driven and knew how to interpret data. You know, it's okay if you're not a data person, but if you're going to be a principal in the 21st century, you're going to have to live and understand and work and manipulate through your data. So in task 2 of, task 2, prompt 2, what we're going to do now is you've done all your narrative work in task 1. Now prompt 2 asks you to graphically represent that work. So I would expect to see tables and graphs and charts, and not just random tables and graphs and charts, but the tables and graphs and charts with narrative to tell your story about your data and how you tell the story from, we looked at this and then we went here and then we went here, and this is how we decided on our most pressing need. So you're telling the story graphically and with your charts and tables in prompt 2. And then at the end of every one of your tasks, you have your reference section and then your appendices. So once you complete this task 2, prompts 1 and 2, to schedule a meeting with your principal and or leadership team to present your findings. And we're not going to require you to do a video of the meeting, but it's highly recommended that you at least take a picture of yourself presenting. If you're not doing that face-to-face, then we would expect you to do a screenshot of your Google Classroom where you're facilitating and or your Zoom meet, and so that you can show you presenting to the group. Now, when you're presenting to group, regardless of the format, whether it's face-to-face or virtually, you should have some type of presentation to present to that group. Again, go back and pull those graphs and charts and tables that you're presenting in your paper, because you're going to tell the story that you've got in your paper. You're to tell the story to your principal and leadership team so that they have a good understanding of how your team came about selecting the most pressing need. So at the minimum, you're going to have a PowerPoint and agenda. And of course, that PowerPoint and agenda will be included in your work as your artifacts. Anything else, Dr. Stedman?
No, I just want to remind you, when you get to this point, and again, what we'll do next week, we will start out with just reviewing task 2 again and introducing task 3. You will always get a review of a task and the introduction of a task each week from this point on. We'll come back to this again. Some of you will start working on this week, and possibly you could possibly finish it as well. When you make your presentation, okay, up here your team said, okay, this is the most pressing need. But when you come to your principal and you meet with your principal, you let your principal know, this is what the team and I have found as the most pressing need. Your principal may say, yeah, move forward with that. I like that. This is the direction I want you to go in. Or your principal may say, that's good, but this is what I want you to work on. It may not be what you find that your principal wants you to work on. You still have to say it with that as that. But when you get to the point that you move forward with your action plan, Your narrative will say, this is what the team discovered, but when we met with our principal, with our administration, this is the direction that they chose for us to move forward with our established PLC. The identified need. You will find what you think is the most pressing need. But again, your administration may not want you to go in that direction or allow you. You have no choice but to honor what they want you to do. So, you present it, but then you ask permission to move forward. But if that's not what they want, then from this point on, you will work with whatever it is that your principal wants you to work on, as long as, remember, as if it can be tested and measured. It can't be discipline. It can't be some type of program. It must be a part of student achievement, and it must be a tested area. Dr. Revis, I'm going to make an executive decision. Since Thursday, we're going to be looking at peer reviewing and APA again. Let's just hold off on that, and I want to come back at this time. I'm going to stop sharing. We're with the students. I want to spend the rest of the time, we've got about 14 minutes. The rest of the time, just we can just answer questions and we can talk from this point on, because I want to make sure that everybody is clear with what they've got to do at this point.
Okay, I have a question.
Okay, James?
Okay, so are you saying that you want us to have the meeting with this principal before the next, not this one, but the next one? Or are you saying schedule one so we can have it for the next time?
No, we just introduced task 2. Task 2 is not even due this week. Task 2, after you complete task 2, and
Right.
you have identified the most pressing need, your team, and you have decided, you're then going to meet with your principal, and you're going to say, this is what the team and the PLC team and I have done. This is what we discovered. And then you're going to say, this is what we have decided the most pressing need is. And at that point, they are either going to give the blessings and let you move forward with your PLC with that identified need, because that's what you're going to build your action plan around that we'll talk about later on. Or your principal's going to say, that's good, I'm glad you discovered that, but this is what I want you to work with.
So it's not, so the meeting with the principal is not to be going on before the 13th?
You don't do anything with the principal until you've met with your team and done everything that I went over and Dr. Revis went over step by step with task 2.
Okay.
Okay.
Dr.
Okay.
Stedman, sorry,
Yes.
I don't have a voice.
That's okay.
But so, okay, I just want to clear. So next week is a short week. We miss a day.
Right.
I don't meet again with my PLC until Wednesday
Right.
next week. So, I mean, obviously we wouldn't have like a deep dive into data, until Wednesday, possibly finishing Thursday with, maybe a follow-up. That only gives me Friday to meet with the principal, and we're getting ready to drop 500 more kids into our virtual school that we've got to schedule next week. So it's a little crazy, but since my assistant principal is part of the PLC, can
Yes.
I
The answer is
use
yes.
him?
Yes. As long as you've
Okay.
got administrative approval, then yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I understand. And again, guys, there's a quick turnaround on all of this. We fully understand. It's a lot on your plate, but I think you also see already the rigor and having to keep up. That's why we're saying you do it. Don't wait until the last minute. And we're introducing task 2 now, because Megan, with some of it, you may even be able to begin some of it this week. You understand
So
what I'm saying?
I have my first meeting tomorrow with them in the
Listen,
morning.
take advantage of that. I know
Do
what
you
we
think
said.
do you think I could kind of go ahead and do like the data strategies and stuff like that?
Absolutely. Give them
Okay.
homework. Give them homework.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Make it work for yourselves.
Perfect.
I have a
Dr.
question.
Stedman, I have 2 questions if I could. First, could we use Google Meet rather than Zoom if our team agrees? Or it just has to be Zoom?
I don't know how compatible Google Meet is with what you have to turn into us. That is, I'm just going with what Gardner Webb has instructed us with and what we have to do, Joel. So nobody's ever done that before.
Okay.
So I would say to use the Zoom simply
Mhm.
because I don't want any problems down the road for you.
Well,
And
we
Joel-
don't want to be guinea pigs, I'm pretty sure.
And Joel, Dr. Stedman and I will actually review some of those Zooms, and you will have a rubric. We'll score you on your participation and leadership in those Zooms. So I think we better stick to Zoom.
Sure thing. Now,
I have a question, Oh, sorry, Joel. Thought you were finished.
Sorry, I had one more. Are our Zoom teams and our peer teams, our peer review teams, are they the same people?
Yes.
Yes, it's the same people. Most of you've got 5 people in your group. Some people have 4. So it's that same group of people that you'll work consistently with probably throughout this program, because you'll follow this same group of people throughout the next 2 semesters as well. So that's why you get to learn each other, because you're going to be working with each other for the next year and a half.
Thank you.
Let me say one thing about my Zoom teams and peer review teams. I had 2 students drop, and I've not gone back and adjusted that. If they happen to be 2 students on the same Zoom team, I may have to rearrange some things, but just know that we may have to be flexible through until drop add. But one of the things we do want to see is how you work together as leaders. I mean, most of you, if you're leaders, you've got a pretty strong personality, and we want to see you step into that leadership role and we don't want the same person be the Zoom master every time. We want you to share that, and we want to see how you work within that team, and we want to see your leadership within that team.
I have a quick question about the peer review. When we do it, will everybody's work be reviewed each time, or is it just one person's work that's reviewed per session?
Go ahead, Dr. Ravis.
On Sunday evening, you will actually have selected 2 of your classmates to peer review. You're always going to peer review 2 people. And then in turn, you have 2 people peer reviewing your work, okay? And there is a peer review rubric. And what Dr. Stephan and I are going to look at is we are also going to assess you on how well and how in depth you're giving feedback. Because as administrators, that's what we do. We give feedback to adults. You're very comfortable giving feedback to your students, but unless you have been in an administrative role or a leadership role, you're probably not that comfortable giving feedback to adults. So we want to see that very formative, in-depth feedback that you are giving your peers.
And we want it to be, constructive feedback in there. We know that none of you are really experts in this. It's a learning process for you. So while your comments are not to be meant negatively or punitively, everything's not going to be hunky-dory. It's not going to be beautiful and flowery. Right. It's not supposed to be. If they see APA issues, then they're supposed to tell you, you need to go back and check your APA. Something's wrong with it. Or if there's grammatical issues, sentence structure issues, they're supposed to tell you that. Now, this Thursday, Dr. Revis is going to do a full review of the peer review process this Thursday during our Zoom session. And Dr. Hamilton is going to do APA based on narrowing it down. This is specifically the areas that you need to focus on. So that focus is going to come Thursday for you. I thought we were going to be with tonight, but we're not going to have time.
So then after we've written our peer reviews and everybody's reviewed each other's work, then that's when we have the Zoom meeting to discuss what we wrote up about each other?
No, you will submit those to the discussion board. I mean, you will submit those for grade. The peer review will be submitted to us. We will grade your peer reviews. And then after you have completed task 1 and task 2 of the AAPSL, then we will talk to you we'll probably talk to you about this next week or the next week. You have to complete a good portion of the AAPSL. Then we're going to tell you, okay, you're required to set up a Zoom session with your Zoom team, and you're to specifically talk about task 1 and task 2 of the AAPSL and your peer reviews at that point. You will talk about the things at that point. At this point, though, you're just going to, when you submit your peer reviews to Dr. Revis and me for a grade, you're going to also submit the peer review back to the people that you've reviewed so that they will have access to it as well with your comments. And the whole purpose is for you to get experience more than anything else. But you may have seen, and I'm looking at Shalise. Shalise may be looking at somebody's work, and she may see something that the person actually writing it did not realize. And when Shalise looks at it, that may help the person to have a better product when they turn their final product in for evaluation or for grade. Does that make sense?
Okay, so we get task 1, we turn it in, and then after that, we pick 2 people to review. And the reviews are due the following Sunday, or we just need to get them the reviews?
You will be told next week, next Tuesday, Dr. Revis is actually going to talk to you about peer reviews in our class. She's going to talk about
On Thursday.
Introduce it. But Tuesday, she's going to talk about the peer reviews that you will actually have to turn in, not this Sunday night, but next Sunday night.
Okay, thank you. I was
Okay,
wondering if that had to be done now. I was confused.
No. Does that help?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, and then again, go back to look under week 1 assignments, week 2, week 3. It will tell you exactly what you have to turn in for that particular week.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Sutton, we have a good question over here on the side. It says, in using the AAPSL template, when we turn in task 1, are we to turn in the draft in the document, leaving the remaining tasks blank, or create a completely new document for task 1?
Each time you turn in, each task should be turned in independently, not with everything else. And then once you complete task 1, then after you complete task 2, then after you complete task 3, then after you complete task 4, you're going to put, and task 5, you're going to put all 5 together into one document that we'll talk about towards the end of the AAPSL development. But when you turn task 1 in, it's an independent document that should only have task 1 on it. When you turn in task 2, it should be an independent document that only has task 2 on it. Does that answer the question?
So we don't need the cover page or anything with it. Just
no, you can submit it the first time so that we can show that you've got it, and then you will use it when you put it all together at the very end of the AAPSL process.
And that follows along with the last question that was asked. Do we use the document entitled Analysis and, let me see. Do we use the AAPSL Helpful Hints or the AAPSL Final Evidence Narrative? And you're going to use the AAPSL Final Evidence Narrative, which is what we call the template. We interchange those 2 names. And the Helpful Hints is just to help you with that template. But you're going to use the one that says Evidence 1, Analysis and Action Plan for Student Learning, AAPSL.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Revis, for the clarification.
Okay. And thank you. Remember, the Helpful Hints document is just simply another document to help make it more understandable and easier for you.
I have a question then about, on the note in the Helpful Hints, it says, note, when submitting your work, make sure to submit task 1 and task 2 at the same time.
Okay.
So
that is okay. That is okay. And that may have been enough. When you get to task 1 only has 1 prompt. Task 2 has prompt 1 and prompt 2. When you submit prompt 1, you've only submitted half of the work. You have to submit prompt 1 and prompt 2 for task 2 to get full credit, and that's what I'm referring to. Does that make sense?
Yes, I
Okay,
think.
thanks Meredith for that.
Thank you.
Good afternoon or good evening. I just have a clarifying question. I know you mentioned it before, but I just want to make sure. For the 3 resources for task 1, which is due Sunday,
Right.
can we use the resources, the links that you all have already included in the Blackboard assignment, and that could be our 3 resources?
If they work for you, then that's why we have them there. We don't always, Tamika, we don't always give all that, but we start out giving you some resources to begin working with. And if everything in there works for your narrative work and what you're doing, then we have no problem with that.
Okay, thank
And
you.
you can also use anything from your text that you
Right.
have.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, these are great questions. Thank you.
You know,
So-
just make sure, guys, that I know many of you were on the APA training before this class. Just make sure, guys, that you are citing in-text citations correctly and that you are developing your references correctly. Those are the 2 main things that you have to worry about for your writing here: in-text citations and your references.
And if you go back to your your resource section in Blackboard, we already have some cheat notes with APA in there. If you'll click on that and look at it, these will help you specifically look at, you know, the things that are more applicable to what you're doing. You're not writing a dissertation. However, you know, with the capitalization, the punctuation, the in-text citation, referencing, those are things, the headings, the figures, you know, those are things that are going to be standard that you have to pay a lot of attention to.
Can I just piggyback off Tamika? You guys had put in there the PLC PowerPoint from Dr. Stone.
Right.
And he has a lot of, I think it's a male, has a lot of great references in there. So
You
can
can use those as
reference that.
well.
Okay, do you have any more information for that citation?
That's all we have. That's everything that we have. And again, this is a archived PowerPoint. So, you know, some of the things may not even be active or relevant, but we gave it to you for whatever you can get out of it.
So when we cite his PowerPoint, do we need we need a date for it? Because I don't see that on his PowerPoint.
Okay, and if it's not on there, you can put 2018 on there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Because that would, Dr. Revis, that would have been in 2018, wouldn't it?
Or fall 2019, maybe.
Yep. Go back. Put 2019 on there. That's
Yeah.
correct. 2019.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, we want things to be accurate, but something like that, we wouldn't qualm about that anyway.
Because we can't remember either, so.
Dr. Stedman, really quick, I
Say that,
have,
Dr. Revis. Any other questions?
I have one question.
Sure.
On just to make sure I didn't overdo this or not do enough. On the example that you provided for the school profile, the amount of information that's included there on that example, do you want us to kind of use that as a guide as to how in detail to go with that profile, or just do whatever we've got to do?
April, you just tell your story, and I will tell you the example is a correct example, but it may not be the best work you see. So if you tell the story about your school, and it's not going to be wrong. You know, yours may be a page, it may be 2 pages, it may be just a good narrative, but as long as you're comfortable with your story, we're okay with that.
If I remember correctly, April, I think that was one of the weakest sections that I saw in that paper was their school profile. I think they bulleted things, and I think they were pretty brief on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
tell your story.
Okay, other questions?
Last question for me.
Okay, Tamika.
I remember, I believe it was last Thursday, someone mentioned we should use the school name. Someone mentioned, a professor, that we should not use the school's name. So am I right? And I've been using like the letters to represent my school. Is that okay? Or do you all want the full school's name?
I think either way is okay. Um, if is your school most recognized by the letters?
No.
Okay, go ahead. What is the name of your school? Just give me an example.
Berry Hill.
Berry Hill.
Yes.
Is it Berry Hill High School, Berry Hill Middle School, elementary school?
We're actually a K-8 school. We're actually just known as Berry Hill School.
And then that's the way I would call it, Berry Hill School.
Okay.
And explain in there that you are unique, that you're a pre-K-8 school.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay.
However, be sure if you're showing data sets, do not include student names on your data sets.
Right. But the name of the school, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, other questions? Okay, thank y'all so much. We look forward to seeing you again on Thursday evening at 7 o'clock. And again, it won't be like this. After about 3 weeks, we'll be able to start backing off a little bit. But this is all important right now, and I think you're seeing that. Those of you that didn't get to join for the APA session today at 6 o'clock, remember there is a repeat session this coming Thursday at 7 o'clock, and 6 o'clock, and that's going to be the last time. So please make sure that you try to join in on that one if you were not able to join today. Okay, well, we'll go ahead, Dr. Ravis.
And in closing, I'd just like to say, for my students particularly, guys, if you're uncertain or you're not sure, reach out to me, email me, call me. I'm a little difficult to get in touch with during the day, in the morning, but email me, and I would rather us talk up front than for you to go down a path and have to turn back.
Exactly.
Let's do it on the front end. Don't be.
And I've gotten several emails, and I've gotten calls from students, so that's okay.
That's what we want you to do.
Dr. Revis is right. We want you to do well, and we want you, and we know that you're having to work into, so we don't want you to waste your time. So if we can fix it up front, then let's fix it up front.
Let's do.
Okay. Thank you so much. Y'all you don't realize it, but I can tell in the questions already, you're doing very well. You're moving along right where we want you to.
Dr. Stedman?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Where did you say the school profile example was located again?
Okay, if you go back to the AAPSL example in Blackboard, it's with the AAPSL example.
Okay.
It's a part of that whole document.
All righty.
Dr. Stedman, does it matter if you type it in double space or single space or font?
No, you have to double space all your work.
Okay. Thank you
for asking that, Tamara.
Yes, thank you.
Actually, I have a question about when we're going through the data. Is it fair, because we're using our school report card from 2 years ago, and we would kind of be going back and forth of, well, this is what our data showed. Like, we're going to look at our beginning of the year stuff from this year because we don't have EOG scores or anything like that. I'm in an elementary school from last year, and it would kind of go back and forth between, well, in 2018-19, it says this. So our data from this year that we have now says this. So it would kind of be okay if it was like a back and forth type of.
Yeah, and good question, Lizzie, because this group, your narrative work is going to be unique to anybody else's work that has ever been written because of what we've dealt with. So you can only work with what you have to work with. And when you do your narrative work, just be very plain and talk about, you can talk about the gaps in there and what you're having to go back and just make sure that it's explained in the narrative work. And, you know,
Okay.
it's okay to use the COVID language in there because it's a part of our lives. We're living it. So, you know, talk about that in what you're doing. But that's a good question.
Okay.
Can I piggyback off of Lizzie?
Sure.
Dr. Chapman? Okay, so I actually already had my meeting. My PLC group has to meet on Mondays because we're a virtual school.
Right.
Serving the virtual students of our school, and we decided to do 3 through 6. And so we had our meeting yesterday, and we looked at a lot of data, and we felt like we needed to kind of use iReady, since that's our district's choice for reading 3D and for that RTA data for 3rd grade K through 3.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Is that okay if we use the iReady data?
Yes.
We know it's not completely valid or reliable because our students are taking these tests at home and there's no one there to proctor them.
Well, there's, you know,
sure.
and, you know, while you won't, and I know, you know, you wouldn't say it just like that, but, you know, you can actually talk about that. The validity of the testing is, you know, that you're concerned about that your team and you are concerned about the validity of the testing because, and
yes,
just like you just said.
And we've had some students who, specifically in my group, because I'm the 6th grade virtual teacher, the first time they took it, they tested at kindergarten level. So we had them retake the test, we reset the test, and then they came back and tested at 8th grade level. So we know.
Yeah. And again,
100% accurate.
As frustrating as it is, your narrative work and what you write should be exactly what you're dealing with, what you're experiencing. You know.
Can I piggyback off of
Sure.
Rachel? I'm sort of in the same situation, but we're using the Scholastics reading inventory and the phonics inventory to help get a lot of our data, and we have a lot of that from last year as well, in addition to a lot of the kids' developmental reading assessments. We have those as well. So are those 3 data points okay to use, or do we need to use the stuff from the school report card?
I would say use all of it.
Okay.
I think you need to use, again, when you're looking at the data, you're looking at everything that you possibly can look at. And you're going to talk about that, and then you're going to narrow it down. So when you're doing your data dive should include everything that you can possibly put your hands on.
Okay, thank you. And a PLC could be at least 3 to 4 people, correct? Or
yes.
the least of 3?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I have a question. I think you pretty much already answered it. I'm sorry if my volume is low.
That's okay.
But would it be okay to include, I'm looking at a 3-year trend data for my school, for the ELA department. So we're looking at the trend data based off our school performance and just where we've scored over the last 3 years, because we're a C school trying to get to a B school. So I was thinking that we look at that data for the last 3 years of testing for that department. Would that be okay?
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
That's good, Shamika.
Thank you.
Okay, great questions. Now, already, like I said, putting a lot of thought into this, and that makes me happy, Dr. Revis. Okay.
Me too. I think you've got some good ideas. Remember, as much data as you can, and then narrow it down. Think of it as a funnel down.
You funnel down, yes. Listen, guys, we're going to let you go and get to it. I know that some of you are going to probably get your supper, take a shower, and then get right back to work. I know you are. But anyway, we're here if you need us, and we'll see you again on Thursday. And Thursday, just give me the thumbs up. Have you gotten your information for TaskStream yet? I talked with James today, so I know James, or no, not James, somebody got theirs. So everybody's gotten theirs. Okay, got you.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I don't have mine yet.
You don't have it. Well, Dr. Lamb's still working on that, James. And when Thursday, if for some reason we don't, just be prepared to let us know so we can find out why you don't have it, if they're still working on things then. So I know that it's in the system now. Okay. Okay. Thank you, guys. We'll see you on Thursday.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay.